Okay.
For sure.
Halfway through the show, we are now at our first trip into the discography of Anita Baker. So, Matt, you both get the first take, and you get to run the numbers.
I do. Yep. So Anita Baker's Rapture comes in at number 441 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums. Number 42 in 1986. Number 2,850 of all time. It is Anita Baker's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. This album also made Rolling Stone's list, coming in at number 404. And Anita Baker is ranked as the number 1,708 highest artist of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. And I was not familiar with any of these songs. I
really?
This,
any?
Yeah,
really?
I don't think so. It didn't really.
Wow.
Nothing really rang a bell here for me.
There's some pretty big hits on this one.
Yeah, and I think it won Grammys, and it was a pretty big album from the very brief overview that I did looking at a little bio of it. But yeah, so this is pretty adult contemporary. It's very. I think I will say this. I think she's my biggest compliment to this record is I think she's got a really unique, interesting, good voice. I think that she seems like she's got it's that deeper voice than most female voices that I think that we've covered. She kind of has this. It's not a baritone. It's not quite that low, but it's certainly
She's
on the
a
alto
contralto.
Range. Contralto
is the name of it, with a range of 3 octaves.
The range stood out to me as well. Who was that? We talked about contralto? Was that what's her name from the 60s?
Is Roberta Flack? Was she? I mean,
no, the white woman. Oh gosh,
Dusty Springfield?
No, I'm gonna. I'll come back to it. But there was another. I thought that there was somebody else that we had covered. That Naya.
Laura Nero.
Laura Nero. Thank
Laura
you.
Nero. Okay.
Was she a contralto, or was that? I'm thinking of somebody else. Anyway,
I always think of Toni Braxton when I think of Anita Baker's voice. They have similar.
Okay. Yeah.
Like that are husky and belters. Yep.
Yeah. So she's got. So there's parts of this where she's got like this deeper kind of.
It's
soulful type voice, but then she also kind of goes higher as well.
It's the lowest vocal range for a female.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yep. And that stood out to me, and then I was impressed with how she was able to, go high as well. So, but yeah, there's not much here that it was fine. This record I would describe as being fine. This was kind of background music for me. I didn't really, nothing really stood out. Nothing I didn't think anything was terrible. It was, it seems of its time with some of the production techniques that they were using. And it's, kind of more of the adult contemporary type vibe that I was getting from it that just didn't really move me in any particular direction, one way or the other. This was kind of like a very thumbs in the middle type serviceable record for me. I'm sure there's many people love this type of thing. It's not really my kind of genre. I don't really have a strong like that's the thing. I listened to it several times. I was like, okay. And aside from her voice and the kind of the unique nature of the voice and what she was doing with it, I didn't really find any, so there's some stuff that was more upbeat and bouncy. There was other stuff that was more of a ballad, and all of it was fine. So I'm thumbs in the middle on Anita Baker, definitively.
Any sort of differences that you notice between her and, like, say, I don't know, Sade or some of those other kind of black artists that
Sade seemed to me like more, I don't know. I thought that Sade was more interesting. I thought that with some of the kind of the percussion that she was doing, I thought that I think I definitely liked that better. That was I thought that was more interesting. Where this was just kind of more standard.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I mean that's kind of where my frame of reference was coming from, was comparing it to those other artists that we've heard. And I enjoyed this album. I definitely heard Sweet Love before somewhere along the way, and maybe something else, You Bring Me Joy. I'm not sure. Definitely Sweet Love. But this is kind of similar in my mind to Sade and Luther Vandross and some of those other type of albums. I really like her voice, and I agree. It's kind of got a deep, like, soulful nature to it, and this is this is by definition, I think, John's beloved Quiet Storm R&B type of sound. It's kind of,
this is Quiet Storm.
yeah, it's got this, it's got this smoothness. It's definitely romantic, and it's got this kind of jazzy element with the horns that come in, and it just characterized kind of that smoky piano bar vibe that we've discussed before and that I've mentioned before, and that definitely is what it reminds me of. The songs are pretty good. I mean, I think she expands out more than I would say like Sade does in terms of thematic themes, thematic lines, and not just about love, but about like, I don't know, mystery is, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I think she's I'm a mess tonight, guys. I don't know what to tell you. But it's good. It's good. I'm thumbs in the middle. I'm thumbs in the middle also. I enjoyed listening to it, but it didn't blow me away in any sort of way. John, what did you think about this album?
John, I bet you John loved it.
I really like this album.
Yeah,
I mean, for me, good R&B is about the singer, right? And I think Anita Baker has a fantastic voice.
She does.
I'm kind of shocked you guys haven't heard songs like Same Old Love and Sweet Love and Caught Up in the Rapture. I mean, these were like massive songs. I pretty much I was kind of like, okay, Anita Baker 86, is this like Sweet Love, Same Old Love Anita Baker, or is this like Giving You the Best That I Got like Anita Baker, like a little bit later? And I'm like, oh, okay, this is like the Sweet Love, Same Old Love Anita Baker. There's a lot of groove in this album, which is what I like. True. I think that's what distinguishes this a little bit more from some of the Quiet Storm I was a little bit more neutral on, like the Luther Vandross album we covered. There just wasn't the meat that is the groove on this. And I wouldn't say it was a complete soft jazz. It was kind of like soft jazz meets the groove, right? With her sort of soulful voice. We talked earlier about Janet Jackson having a wispy voice, but it was kind of also like a sexy voice. Like, this is kind of a different version of that, right? It's like a deeper register. It's like a more world-worn voice. Another person I would say as a male that has elements of Anita Baker's voice is like Bill Withers. Like she projects to me a little bit with that warmness and comfortability that like the Bill Withers voice gave me when I would listen to those albums, right? Just that you're enjoying it. You can put it on. I know Matt said it fades into the background, but I've often said that I think really good R&B albums are albums that can be in the forefront if you decide you want them to be in the forefront, but also can be great background music, but not in a dismissive way, more in the sort of the tone they set for you. I think I just processed this album as a much bigger album maybe than you guys do, just because it was always around me at different times. And Matt, I know that like R&B, I don't want to speak for you. I know R&B seems to be a little bit of a tough one for you sometimes. With stuff. I guess I can just explain it that I don't know if there's a magic alchemy to it for me. It really just kind of comes down to the sound of the singer's voice and the mood it evokes for me. That has always been what R&B is for me. I don't need more from it than that, because the feeling gets imparted to me by the troubadour who's delivering the message, right? So if like the voice doesn't resonate, then it doesn't register at the same level. But if it does, the same material sang by someone who I don't feel. A good example is it's similar material, right, to what Luther Vandross had, and there's Luther Vandross songs I really like, right? But it just there's more to this, and there's more replay value, there's more heft to it. I will absolutely admit that female singers are not the impediment to me that I think they are to rock critics sometimes, and even people I know who just seem to prefer hearing a male voice more than a female voice. I don't have that hang up. Not because I'm some super enlightened guy, right? It's just I've always equally enjoyed male and female singers, right? Mm-hmm. So I think for my end of things, this meets my criteria, which is good, memorable voice, sings pleasant songs that are sort of universal in the emotions and the feel, and that is the recipe for me for a great R&B album. So thumbs up for me.
No, her voice
sure.
is definitely there. I noticed that almost immediately. It's just, you know, maybe for me that in and of itself isn't enough. Like I need some of the music to kind of resonate with me as well. And
can I posit a theory, Matt, and see what you think about this?
Yeah.
Do you think the fact that it doesn't seem like this music was in your airspace, like growing up in the way that other stuff, right? That you're like, oh, I saw the Beastie Boys video, right, from the other one, or like Phil Collins, right? Like, because to me, like this was as omnipresent as, maybe not quite as omnipresent, but like I think the gap between how omnipresent something like Phil Collins was for you, like this, it would be like all omnipresent, right? And this would be like foreign, right? Whereas for me, Phil Collins was only slightly more omnipresent than like Anita Baker, right? Like it just, they were both all the time on.
To be omnipresent for me, it either had to be playing in my house a lot, right? So that's either probably my mom, coming from my mom, or most likely my brother, because he was only, or maybe occasionally my sister, or on MTV, or on, you know, just on the regular top 40 radio, you know. Even friends that might have been into something, at least as a kid, in 1986. I wasn't really, you know, hearing them. I was just like, what was in my world? And I don't remember hearing Anita Baker anywhere. And if I did, it was not all. That certainly wasn't omnipresent. So
well, like I don't think I rode on a bus until the age of 15 that didn't have Quiet Storm R&B. Like every bus driver I ever had, right? Like so, like as a result, you know, it was just when I think of riding the bus, right? Like I think of what would have been considered to be like urban adult contemporary, because the bus drivers could put it on, right? And it was safe music that they enjoyed, but also, you know, wasn't gonna be offensive, right? But it was pleasant enough that they liked it. So like to me, I just thought everybody rode on buses, right? Where like, and it wasn't the same bus driver, by the way. It was all the bus drivers, right?
Well,
so like it was.
All my bus drivers were listening to Nashville country. So
okay, well, and there you go. And to me, that is a foreign genre, right? Because like no one listened to country where I grew up, right? So like I think things like the omnipresence of Garth Brooks, right? Like were kind of lost on me. I only knew him as, oh, he's a big star, but like no one I know listens to him. And maybe that's what R&B is for you, Matt. Like it, like you know it exists, but it like just wasn't part of the DNA.
I would I would have gladly switched places with you, John. Growing up.
Okay. I'm not saying it was better. I'm just saying it's just I've become more and more. I'm just saying I've become more and more aware, right, of some of like what was floating around, right? Like like my dad and mom weren't playing Anita Baker all the time, although like I absolutely can remember like my mom putting on music that was similar to what like Anita Baker was, right, and listening to it. So I mean, it wouldn't have been out of character for her to put Rapture on, right, because she would have said something along the lines of, I love her voice, you know. That's how I would have gotten to it, right?
John, so here, just to give you a sense of like, because I was just thinking like, are we ever going to cover like something like, because we've done some country, but it's been like roots traditional country. Like, did we?
I made sure we put some stuff on in the 90s for sure.
And so I'm just looking. We said Garth Brooks, who certainly was omnipresent in my world growing up, because he was all over. The people freaking love that guy. His highest rated album on Best Ever Albums is an album from 1990 called No Fences. It's ranked number 1,600 in the 1990s. Okay. So that's, you know, that's what we're dealing with comparatively to like some of the R&B, which is more critically acclaimed.
But yeah, like the 80s was still where like there were these clear yards that didn't exist in popular music, right? And kind of like black radio was one of them, right? And country was another. And hip hop, right? There wasn't even hip hop, right? It was rap, right? Was like what we're really saying. That was another, right? And these, there was mainstream music, and then there were all these like sub-genres. The indie rock even was still
Yeah.
Like it wasn't on MTV, right? It was sort of flirting with it, just like there could be a Quiet Storm R&B song that broke through, right? Or a like a certain rap song that could break through, but these were still niche musics at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's interesting because it's just like, is where you grew up. And, internationally it would be fascinating because a lot of these genres we're saying were like definitively American styles of music, right?
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure there were, yeah.
There's no reggaeton playing in upstate New York in the 80s, and there still isn't.
Well, I don't think there was a lot of reggaeton playing in pretty much anywhere in the United States in the 80s. Yeah, so yeah. So how about you, Josh? Because do you straddle the line on this, or do you associate more with like Matt's narrative or my narrative? Like, where would you say you are?
Yeah, I'm probably definitely more with Matt.
Okay.
I don't think my parents listened to a lot of R&B, and then whenever I was listening to the radio, before I was driving and stuff, that I would have been listening to oldies. I think that's kind of where my frame of reference was, like Beach Boys and Beatles and kind of all of the 60s, and I guess Motown too, but kind of all that frame of reference. So you're right though, if you're not exposed to it, we never turned the dial to an R&B station or something, I would have never like really heard this.
Well,
and we didn't have Spotify just to listen to whatever we wanted
right.
to, whenever we wanted to either.
Well, I can't stress enough, as much as like, my dad was into music, right? And my mom listened to it a lot, how little of my musical taste was defined by like what my parents were listening to, right? Like almost all of my music taste was defined by people's older brothers or random guys that I thought were knowledgeable or cool, right? That did different stuff, or kind of being drawn in by a band's name or a album cover, right? Like at a different place, and saying like, well, that's interesting. Do I like this band? Because they have an awesome name, right? And then I think it's funny because we covered Sonic Youth tonight, and I think that's actually how I stumbled across Sonic Youth, right? Like when I was 9, I was like, what a cool band name that is. And I was like, I wonder if I'll like what they sound like. And around that time, and I'll save that story for later, but it's just funny that we covered them, right? Because that's how it happened. But yeah, and that's how like Quiet Storm was basically like, I was getting that from, at the risk of sounding, overly, like I was getting it from various older Black folks around me at all times. I mentioned the bus drivers, but it could just as easily have been like my little league coach in 9th grade who would listen to that music while, in the dugout, right? Like I think of Quiet Storm there because that was played. There were just all these guys, right? And it was like, oh, like these guys listen to, R&B, like certain people listen to like oldies, like Motown or 50s stuff, or like certain people listen to, like Led Zeppelin, right? Or Grateful Dead, right? Like it's just, I don't think I processed as any more of, oh, okay, this is the thing that lots of people listen to. So, yeah.
Well, I think too that you kind of grew up in a more like urban city environment than I did.
A little bit more,
sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that, you're just, that brings a certain type of, I don't know, exposure that, when we were all in DC together, you just hear people playing music in the city when you're walking the city and stuff like that. So I guess you just hear it more.
And that's what I'm saying. It wasn't like I sought it out or like, oh, I'm so worldly. I think it's just, you can't help but notice, right? When you're around more people of different cultures that you hear more stuff, right? And that's kind of, that's why I think hip hop and rap appeared on my thing, because I was near New York, right, which was one of the centers, and I was around a lot of people who would say from an early time in their life that their favorite music was rap music, right? And so yeah, it just was like, I don't think there was ever a part in my childhood where I didn't know plenty of people who said their favorite music wasn't, like when I was starting, right, it would have been like, Rakim and KRS-One and stuff like that, right, would have been the people that, so So, yeah. But thumbs up for me on this one. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thumbs up for me too.
Oh, you changed. Look at that.
Well, what did I say before? Thumbs in the middle?
You said in the middle.
Oh,
I'm staying in the middle.
Okay.
I'm sticking to my guns. I liked everything that John said, but I'm still in the middle.
I'm thumbs in the middle, trending upwards.
I think you know me well enough, Matt, to know that I'm rarely ever trying to convince you. I'm just spouting off at the mouth with whatever I feel. So I always appreciate that.
No, it all makes sense.
Listen.
And it's you're certainly a lot. Yeah, it's not just who you are as a person is certainly has a lot to do with the environment in which you grew up, and certainly your taste in pop culture that does as well. So.
I just felt this album needed a little bit more, and I know both of you guys had more to say. I just had to drag it out of you a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like a different angle, maybe, than the album itself.
And that's the other thing, too. When I listen to music, I'm basically just listening to the music. I'm not... I know you contextualize things a lot more than I do, John. It's like, well, not just the music, but where does this fall in line with, like, not just my experience, but just the overall landscape of music in general, and what's happening culturally and historically and all that stuff. And I'm just like, it sounds good.
Well, no, and that's, I mean, there's stuff like, and when you're passionate, you go, but it's like, I don't like to drag stuff into contextualization all the time. Like, it's like kind of like my lane, but occasionally when I'm getting shrug emoji, I'm gonna like pull it past shrug emoji.
I was definitely giving shrug emoji. I was like, what am I gonna say about this? Like, I don't it's in the middle.
And since I like this more than shrug emoji, I'm like, I'm gonna make sure that we have a conversation about this. So